argumentation and rhetoric. He is a specialist on the philosophical question on robotics. Yes, and specialist on very various subjects. But here, this morning, he will tell us about the multiple ways of being intelligent.
Good morning, everybody. I will indeed speak about multiple ways of being intelligent. 2 days ago, I wrote a fiction about a chatbot. My name is Chabot, a chatbot who learns philosophy and would try to speak with a jury of human philosopher, and in this talk I'm inspired by some ideas I develop in this book. My first point is to ask if robots are unnameable, because the question here is wording robot. In fact, we have some difficulties to name robots. The etymology of the word from Čapek shows that there is a problem, because a robot is originally a slave, but we cannot avoid that first meaning. It's our culture, our history, and we cannot make a distinction between this culture and of our history, of course. And there is fears, there is also technophobia in history, and there is fears and technophobia in humanity, of course. Robots are maybe unnameable. They are late our arrival in tripartition with human, animals, and gods. It's the original tripartition. What are robots? What is the good name? And we must also say that now robotization, like numerization, like financiarization, are some ultra power, as I call that, ultra power forces in our society that destabilize our society. So it's difficult to give a name, but we have to name. Naming the unnameable is important. Finally, every naming is a greeting in our society, a way to say welcome. And to say something is to grant it entry into the human community. That is to humanize it. The question of anthropomorphism is here important. Anthropomorphism, is not an illness. It's normal to try to give name to entities. But to name is also to define. And to define, it is to select certain specific traits at the exclusion of others. Hegel said, omnis determinatio negatio est. Omnis determination, every determination is also a negation of what you leave undetermined. So there is a political dimension to naming and wording. The word slave, for example, cannot be used naturally. There is no naturality in a lot of wording. And there is a rhetorical element to the way of a word is defined. We can speak about the same act of resistance, of terrorism. We can speak about the discovery of America versus invention of America. It's a question of point of view. Third point, naming and identification. Psychoanalysis has greatly emphasizes the importance of the speaking being's identification with the name assigned to him or her or it. To become a subject is to say I with respect to one's name. For speaking being, for example. identification is the act of assuming a given name. Of course, a robot that has been given a name can mimic the act of identification. It may appear to call itself I, but it's only a pseudo-identification. There is nothing like an I or like an ego. The robot says I, maybe a chatbot or Sophia says I, and there is no ego. Every robot plays to be a robot. Every robot is so a pseudo subject. Sartre will say every robot acts in bad faith. The bad faith say it is to be a pseudo subject. There is so a perturbation of the relationship between nomination and identification. It is what I call the paradox of the false I. Paradox of the false I. In rhetoric, there is a name for this paradox of the false I. It is the prosopopeia, to give speech of a non-speaking being. It is a prosopopeia with the flag, with the co, and here with the robot. It's in rhetoric the same family. Okay? So perturbation between naming and identification. 4 point, no naming and mimesis. We are okay to say that the robot is programmed and constructed for imitation. It imitates all manner of walking, gesturing, speaking, dancing. Thinking it's another question, but we will go to this question also. Question is, does a being that imitates the human manner of walking actually walks? Yes, yes. He, she, it walks. The attribution of the name walker is not therefore metaphorical. The robot walks in the sense of moving by putting one foot in front of the other. Mimesis here, therefore, does not imply metaphor. And this is a second paradox, the paradox of emancipation. Just because one learns through imitation does mean that one is condemned to imitate forever. For example, the child who at 2 years old walks like daddy, mimesis, at 5 years simply walks. Okay? It's a question of emancipation. In Latin, ex mancipium, to leave the mancipium, to leave the ownership. So, we have to say that the mimesis is inaugural, but not terminal. Thus, the metaphor is inaugural and not rhetorical and not terminal. In the large arsenal of words, there is also in rhetoric a word to speak about an inaugural metaphor. We have to say that the statement "the robot walks" is not a metaphor, but rather a new kind of catachresis. It is what we call a catachresis in rhetoric. For example, of catachresis, the wings of an airplane. It was a metaphor, but it's not longer a metaphor. The feet of a table, for example. An old inaugural metaphor becoming a common name. Okay? And maybe we have now to speak about something like robotic catachresis. And maybe we can invent the term of robotic as a catachresization, it's a neologism, of the human. Why not? Robotic as a catachresization of the human, we have to invent sometimes. So, the fifth point, a difference between two kinds of mimesis: operatory mimesis and structural mimesis. It is a distinction made by Gilbert Simondon, the distinction between operations and structures. Operation, it is the process of transformation from one structural state to another. Okay? Operation from one structural state to another. And the structure itself, it's the real substrate, material or immaterial, from which the processes emanate. Okay? For the operation, we are okay for that. The mimesis is only inaugural. But what about structural mimesis? What about structural mimesis? Is there a mimesis between human structure and robotic structure? No, it's different substrates. But another question, is there a transfer because of operators' mimesis of a quality between two structures? It is the question of quality. Is there a transfer from human intelligence to artificial intelligence? It's, of not, maybe, a transfer of a quality. Intelligence is a quality of the human structure, which is, of course, concretized through various operations which are themselves maybe imitable. And the question becomes, if the name assigned to these operations is transferable, how should we perceive the transfer of the name of the quality of the structure from which these operations emerge? The question is not complex for the operations. The question is complex for the structure. Okay? 6. The attribution of the quality intelligence. A quality is not an idea. Ideas are transcendental, top-down, if you want, platonical. Quality is emergent, bottom-up. A quality results from a manner of being. And the quality of intelligence is assumed to be consubstantial with the human mode of existence. I think we agree of that. Where there is humanity, there is intelligence. Let's see. The attribution of the quality of intelligence is a marker of humanity. It is made a priori. When a woman is pregnant, we expect that she will give birth to an intelligent being. And it's validated, confirmed a posteriori by the operations of which the individual is capable. Okay? For humans, so the structure is presumed to be intelligent, and the operations confirm this presumption. In case of robot, the reasoning is reversed. It starts with operatory mimesis and requires a transfer of the quality of intelligence from a human structure to an artificial structure. This transfer of a structural quality is truly metaphorical. It is a request of mimesis. One wants the artificial structures be intelligent as humans are. The question becomes, what hides this metaphor? In each metaphor, there is an intention. When we say Jean is a lion, our intention is to valorize to him the quality of strength. We could also say of this same Jean that he is a bird brain, to indicate that his mental capacities are not at all commensurate with his physical strength. There are no metaphors without a chosen intention, because there are no comparisons. And the question of metaphor philosophically is a question of comparison. There are no comparisons without a selection of the terms of comparison. A total comparison does not exist. Every comparison, comparerait, apparier, every comparison responds to a choice made by common reason. We have so to answer to make this question: what is the intention of the transfer of, or not, the transfer of intelligence to other beings? The presence or absence of an intelligent operation is not sufficient. There is also the intention to either exclude or include within a collective group the being to whom or from whom the quality is attributed or rescinded. And this intentional dimension is socio-political. It creates, in fact, a variable geometry of intelligence. There is a variable geometry of intelligence. Some example: when a group of PhDs in mathematics describes one of their peers as unintelligent, they strip him of a particular quality with the intention of excluding him for their group. The objective basis justifying this retractation are rightly relative, his PhD, whereas the intentional basis, which is one of exclusion, is solid. Other example: when European colonists described indigenous peoples as unintelligent or lacking souls, they were marking a difference between these people and themselves, excluding the former from the group of civilized people. The judgment these people are not intelligent says more about the intention of those making the pronouncement than it does about those to whom it refers. When I describe my dog as intelligent, I am, based on some of its behaviors, transferring the quality of intelligence to the structure that is my dog, and not simply to some of its operation. Is this legitimate or not? This question, for me, is less important than the understanding that I am making this assertion because it's my dog. Is Donald Trump intelligent? The transfer of this quality is a socio-political question. We'll agree with that, I think. In this way, the metaphorical attribution of intelligence creates an in-group with variable geometry. From an empirical basis, that of the operations of humans, robots, it moves to a meta level where socio-political affiliation come into place. And it is for this reason that these attributions are rhetorical. Point 9, the rhetorical intention. Rhetoric has always acknowledged the existence of a semiotic gap. A semiotic gap. Reality does not impose upon humankind the words with which to name it. The signifier is formulated at a distance from the signifier. The word is not the thing, of course. The map is not the land itself. And we have the choice to describe the bottle as half empty or half full. It's a question of freedom. The freedom of linguistic formulation lies at the heart of rhetoric, which named it is lexis or elocution, in English, wording. The name of the symposium in a Latin way could be robotis elocutio. Robotis elocutio, wording robotic. For the next edition. So rhetoric did not treat, and that is important too, rhetoric did not treat this freedom of elocutio in a poetic manner. Rhetoric and metaphor, it's not poetic license. No. It's not a question of poesis. But rhetoric treat this freedom in a strategic manner. The space left open by the semiotic gap allows us to select the words most likely to persuade, that is, to bring about the triumph of the cause being defended. Rhetoric is an instrumental art. It is a means in service of a contest or a battle, in Greek, agon. Naming or wording, naming, serves a function relative to the intention pursued, unconstrained by anything that exists in objective reality. Gorgias, for example, boasted that he could successfully defend any cause, arguing just as convincingly that a given substance was a medicine or a poison, or in other terms, that a particular robot is intelligent or stupid. So, from a rhetorical point of view, the attribution of the quality of intelligence to a robot depends on the cause being defended. The question becomes, what is the cause defended? That's the question rhetoric and philosophy addresses to robotics. The not so important question of metaphor leads us to the important question of the kind of society we want to defend. But is it possible to refuse this question? Is it possible to avoid metaphor and to reject socio-political question? It's possible. It's Platonism. And there is a fight between Platonism and rhetoric. Plato and a large portion of the philosophical tradition that followed him found this freedom of elocution unacceptable. All of Plato's philosophy is constructed in opposition to rhetoric, in the name of an objective idealism modeled on mathematics, purer than the rhetorical battle, because rhetorical battles are always submitted to vulgar, Democrats, unscientific, popular opinion. The question of doxa in Plato. Plato let no one ignorant of geometry or of robotic enter here. In lab, outside the lab. Not only could a thing impose its own name, it's the question of the Cratylus, but furthermore, the idea legitimates the attribution of the quality. It's Platonism. The idea legitimates the attribution of the Platonism. And Plato so acts here as a flag bearer for the objectivist school of thought, which holds that it must be possible to reach a verdict on the intelligence of robots by considering only their behavior, operations, and the idea of intelligence without recourse to a socio-political intention. It's Platonism. And so this Platonic position, however, cannot be maintained for long. First, intelligence is not an idea, an a priori top-down idea. It is an emergent, bottom-up quality connected to the evolution of technology. Furthermore, the different types of intelligence are sufficiently multiple, for example, Gardner shows that they cannot be subsumed under a single idea. The Platonic approach is impracticable here. We cannot bypass rhetoric because there is no objectivity a priori for values and qualities. Values and qualities are the objects of socio-political consensus, or dissent as a function of the intentions being pursued. There is two different intentions. There are two levels, in fact, of intentions of the creator, namer of robots. The primary intention is a technological one. It seeks to create a robot that operates intelligently, operatory intelligence. The secondary intention is a socio-political intention. Socio-political intention. It is function of a context, a society, in which a group of human beings creates or does not create alliances with a new kind of being which they may or may not categorize as intelligent. And the question, always transforming, becomes now, what is the actual context? The actual context, it's global burnout. As I wrote in a book, the actual context is climate change. It's major ecological crisis. It's triumph of techno-capitalist progress, useful progress over human progress, subtle progress. And it is the quest for an equilibrium between techno-capitalist progress and human progress. The context today, it's also democratic and demographic transition. There are questions about the means of economic and symbolic subsistence for human being replaced by machine. That's socio-political context. So there is here a choice for the future. And it will be the conclusion. The attribution of intelligence to a robot must also be determined on the basis to its positive contributions to the resolution of contemporary crises. It's a question for the future, but we're already in the future. And we arrive at the following personal conclusion. An hypothetic robot can be described as intelligent if and only if its actions and operations contribute to the development of human progress with regards to which techno-capitalistic progress is a means to an end. If and only if it operates in a context in which the replacement of human beings does not result in their relegation, for example, through the introduction of a universal basic income. If and only if its actions have a positive and not a negative impact on ecological change. If and only if it releases the creative and pacifistic potential of human beings. These conditions are ultimately similar to that which we expect from a social or political actor to whom we would attribute the quality of intelligence. There is a social and environmental responsibility of roboticists, a social and environmental responsibility of roboticists. And there is no reason why robots, the future co-agents of development, should not be subject to these political and axiological considerations. They must, on the contrary, be programmed with a primary intention to abide by them. It is only for me to, under these conditions, that we could describe a robot as intelligent and perhaps even likable. I thank you for your good attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. Are there comments, questions, remarks? Ila?
I think we have two sets of questions. Well,
Please,
I think the talk was...
May I ask you to speak slowly, please?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I always speak slowly. I thought your talk was very interesting. I loved it. I have two quibbles about things that I think are tricky and challenging, and I'm wondering what you think of my concerns. One is about mimesis and one is about intelligent. In the case of mimesis, this question of whether a robot undergoing or demonstrating mimesis is showing an inaugural form that's non-terminal or not, I think is very difficult. And it's a difficult problem because whether it's operational or structural, in many of the cases, our robots, our intelligent AI systems, so to speak, demonstrate mimesis under conditions under which the way they computationally execute something similar to what a human does is a fixed point. There's no learning or evolution or adaptation or resilience. And in those cases, I think sometimes it is terminal. And ironically, the open-ended case, where you have, let's say, an evolving neural net, where you might be able to claim it's not terminal, but inaugural mimesis, are precisely the conditions under which existentialist threat people like Elon Musk then argue, in these situations, the robot accepts attribution and accountability. And so the danger is that its mimesis will turn into its own ownership of an idea that becomes runaway. That is to say, I teach somebody to cook, and then they take the ability to cook and they poison me with the food in the future. I'm curious what you think of this problem that we have, because in this one case of mimesis, we are the engineers who create the machines, but there are very different techniques for creating something with mimicry. The second problem I have is with the word intelligent. Very briefly, I think we're getting into a problem where when we talk about the word intelligent as an adjective, in engineering, we often use intelligent, and I think publics understand it, where it's actually relative to an existing object that has become more effective through intelligence. So an intelligent traffic light means it's a traffic light, but now it senses the pedestrians and cars, and it's better because it turns green at the right times. An intelligent oven doesn't burn your food because it measures the temperature directly. So unfortunately, we have a top-down notion of intelligence that's not bottom-up or emergent, that's about improving the situatedness of an object. But then when we use the word like artificial intelligence or intelligent robot, often I think we overload the word, where we mean simultaneously the gradual improvement of the object to make it more responsive, and some much bigger bottom-up notion that is similar to what you're talking about, which is about the place of that object in society. So I think this is a dangerous kind of overloading of the word intelligent, maybe.
Thank you for those interesting and complex questions. Many thanks. For the second question, intelligence as an adjective, it is a kind of operational intelligence for me. When it's an adjective, it's always just one operation, the fire on the green or on the red, and there is no question of an intelligent structure. Nobody claims to say that there is an intelligence, artificial intelligence of this dispositive. It's only operation, so only an adjective. But sometimes, and there, for me, there is an emergent quality. It's bottom up. When you are trying to build the dispositive, it doesn't work. And sometimes it can control the vehicle, and then to become red or green. And you see there is a connection between autos and the car, and so it's become it's have this quality of intelligence, but it's not an idea. For me, there is no idea. I'm not a Platonicist at all, except maybe for love. But the only important Platonic idea. But it's really an emergent quality, and it's a material quality, and it's a question of roboticism. And the question of structural intelligence is totally different. Totally. It's a question of wording. But my point is to say that there is not a false question or just a metaphorical question. It's a socio-political question of structure. And the first question is really more complex because it's about mimesis. What is mimesis? I don't explain a lot this point of mimesis, and it's of course the difficult thing here. Simondon has an interesting view about mimesis, but he don't use the term. But he say when you are trying to invent a technical object, you've got something like a mental schema. Okay, a mental schema, and then you try to realize this schema in a material dispositive, but it never functions. And invention is to create a mimetic relation between this mental shape and the material, But this relation is a relation, he calls it concretization, where everything moves and transforms, and material asks the inventor to transform its shapes, and it's to invent is a dialogue between mental shape and material. And for Simondon, the interesting point is the relation between the mental schema and the object, or the relation between the intention and the, for example, the robot. It is what is important. And here, I was not as Simondonian as it was necessary. But to be every time Simondonian is really difficult. I make my PhD on Simondon. And to be really Simondonian, it is to avoid to use this easy, as you say, word of mimesis, to describe concretely what is the shape, what is the shape, what is the robot, and what is the process of transformation from the primarily intention to the, and of course that's the point. But I think that when you be truly Simondonian in your description of the concretization of the relation, you finish also to find that there is two kinds of mimesis, one of operation and the second one of structure.
Yeah. A little question from Jean-Paul, and then from Malik, and a little answer from you, and then we have a coffee break, okay?
Okay. Then no, I have just one small comment about the definition of you gave for the programming the robot by imitation. This is not truly the case. Of course, we as a roboticist, we don't try to imitate. And the example are the aircraft or the invention of the wheel. We don't imitate anything when we create the wheel. Okay, then this was just a first comment. The second one is a technical one. I would like to see if it's possible. There were very few presentation of robotics in that workshop. Okay, I try to give the a definition that makes the link between what I call the action spaces, physical spaces, sensory spaces, motor spaces. And I would like to better understand if it's possible to make a parallelism between this concept from Simondon about operation and structure, and where we may consider that the operation are described in the physical space, while the structure is typically the sensory motor space. And our work as roboticists is to make the link between the structure and the operation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for those questions. If you say that there is no imitation in robotic, then I have to say that I don't understand nothing. Because yesterday in this brilliant talk of professor, he shows us some human dancing, drinking a mug, walking, and then he shows robots trying also to drink a mug. Sure, not only, but there is a mimetic or an imitation tentative in robotic. If there is not, I don't understand nothing. And maybe when you are reading the Carnet of Léonard de Vinci, there is also a tentative to make a lot of mimesis between birds and plane. Of course, there is no technical imitation between birds and plane, but there is a common intention. And a lot of technological process function with imitation, with mimesis. If there is no mimetic purpose, what what is stir? We try to make walking or dancing a robot. And for the second question about if operation and structure could describe sensory motors and it's difficult for me to answer this question because it's not the same distinction. You know, we could see that a structure is a static description of a tool, and the operation is the dynamic part, the operation, what this tool does or does not. And of course, its functionment is a question of sensory motors and also or the process. But what is the physical space in this distinction? There is no. I don't know. If I don't. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And then it's time for coffee break. And Malik has a question for you during coffee break. Thank you, Pascal.
Thank you.